Hello, everyone. Nice to see a camera on. So tonight we're going to talk about the Rosh Hashana evening, the first night of Rosh Hashana, and all the customs associated with that. So okay. So we're going to talk about that tonight and see the depth and the power of that we have on this very special night. So firstly, to understand the night of Rosh Hashana, we really also need to understand a little bit what Rosh Hashana is all about, what the energy is, and how this is reflected in the meal and all the customs that we have behind the meal. There are a lot of customs about the meal and how that's all sort of connected to that. So what is the energy of Rosh Hashana? So we know that Rosh Hashana is the head of the new year. And when we talk about the head of the year, it's very different to talking about the beginning of the year, because the head controls the body, and Rosh Hashana and how we behave on Rosh Hashana and all our actions on Rosh Hashana and everything we do on Rosh Hashana is all about this idea that Rosh Hashana is the head of the year. What actually happened in creation on Rosh Hashana? What actually is the sort of historical event that we are celebrating? So it's the day that man was created. Man was created on Rosh Hashana. Hashem started creating the world, and then man was created. And on that day, it says that Adam crowned Hashem as king. So we see that there's a relationship between the person and Hashem. That's why it's our day of judgment. It's not really our day of judgment, actually. That's much more Yom Kippur. It's about crowning Hashem as king and fulfilling the purpose of our creation. So Rosh Hashanah is it's a very serious time, and it's also a very, very joyous time. And so it's a time that we can tap into a power that determines everything for the year. Just like the head controls the body and it determines how the body is going to behave and act and where it's going to go and where it's going to walk. And, it's all determined and it's all controlled within the head. So too, it determines what type of year we're going to have, that we have a power to sort of create our reality on Rosh Hashana, what type of year we're going to have. So every single action that we do on Rosh Hashana night and every movement and every conversation can influence the way that year is going to go. We really determine that. And even our thoughts on Rosh Hashana have a very high power. And again, specifically on the first night of Rosh Hashana, every nuance, every attitude, everything we do bears a tremendous amount of weight for the entire year. If you want to imagine, a bit of like an example might be like, if you're going for an interview, like the first impression you make is what's sort of often the long lasting one. And it can take a very long time sometimes to like come up with a new, to change that. If someone has a first impression, sometimes it takes a very long time to change that. Rosh Hashanah is sort of like the first impression for the year, and specifically that first night of Rosh Hashanah, or another way of looking at it, just like a head, like we have right now in the time that we're living, the head of the state is determining a lot of what's happening. Their attitude is determining what the rules are for us. And so it's different from state to state because different heads of the state have different attitudes and philosophies of how to handle the specific situation that we're in. And that's going to determine my actions and what I'm allowed to do and what I'm permitted to do. So the head has this ability to control everything around it. So too, Rosh Hashanah has this ability to control and really impact in a very deep way what's going to happen for the rest of the year. So it is a very, very high power, and we want to tap into it and we want to utilize it in a very appropriate way. When I was growing up in the community that I lived, it was not unusual for people it wasn't really not uncommon for people not to talk on Rosh Hashana anything extra than they had to say. So they would say the prayers. They would wish people a good year. At the table, they would only talk Torah or say Tehillim and do all the actions, which we're going to go through. And it was not uncommon, especially the first night of Rosh Hashana, there was a real seriousness in the air and not to talk. And one of the reasons not to talk anything extra was that in case I'll say something negative, so for sure, if I say something negative about someone else, that can really have an impact on their year. And if I say something negative about someone else, then maybe I'll be judged that way as well, because it says the way that we speak about others is the way that we're judged. And not to mix in any sort of judgment through the year. This was something that people were very careful to. They preferred to remain silent than to say the wrong thing. And so I always felt on Rosh Hashana like this real seriousness as the new year is being determined. It says sort of like Hashem is watching, and depending on how we determine the year, that's the new energy that's going to come into the year. That's going to be the renewal of the year. So this was always like a very, I guess, a very serious time, not a sad time, but it was a little bit more serious and at the same time joyous, because you want to bring in joy in order to have a joyous year. So there's a story about a very great rabbi, and he was ready for his Rosh Hashana meal, and he had his Rosh Hashana meal sort of laid out in front of him. He was dressed in white, as is custom for some people to dress in white on the eve of Rosh Hashana. And he had a beautiful table with lots of guests. And he had this beautiful candelabra in the middle of the table, lit with candles. And his wife had prepared the most amazing meal. And he was ready to start this beautiful Rosh Hashana meal. And then as they were prepared to start and everything was set perfectly, suddenly one of the guests accidentally knocked over the candle. The whole candelabra came toppling down and the lights were all off and it was dark. Couldn't relight them and it was dark. His wife was coming in with a tray of fish that she wanted to serve. And as she's coming, because of the darkness, she trips and all the fish goes everywhere on the floor. And so the rabbi, he gets up and he wants to help out and he wants to see what was happening. And he comes and to help and he slips as well. And now he's filthy. So they're sitting in the dark and the food's all over the floor and he's dirty. And the whole scene, the whole perfect scene that they had before is completely chaos. And this is going to be his Rosh Hashana meal, certainly not what he anticipated or expected. And he said that with a lot of sort of determination, he chose to instead be very joyous. And he decided that he was going to have a very joyous Rosh Hashana anyway. And he controlled his anger. And he said that that year was the sweetest year that he ever had. And I was reading this story and I was thinking to myself that for me, it really, really hit home, because I think that right now for this year, I was certainly feeling that it's going to be a very different year. Rosh Hashana is certainly not going to be the same. And I guess I was very focused on the things that were lacking, that were not going to be this year. Everything that I was used to that would normally be, and that we're not going to have this year. So I was feeling a little bit sad, and, we're not going to have shul. And it seemed that everyone I bumped into recently in the last few days had very similar sentiments. And certainly it's what I was feeling. Like one person was saying, for him, shul is everything for Rosh Hashana. For him, it's the singing that puts him in the right mood. It gives him the right feeling. It gives him the right attitude. That's what he loves. He loves the singing in shul. And then I was speaking to someone else and she said to me, not being with family this year, that's going to be so strange and so hard. And then another person I was speaking to was not having guests. So for many of us, this Rosh Hashana is going to be a very, very different Rosh Hashana. and certainly not one that we've experienced before. And it's easy to get caught up in what's lacking. And it's certainly where my frame of mind was quite recently. And it's easy to get caught up in that, I just want to be with this person, or I want to be with that person, or I'd love to be in shul, or how am I going to do this on my own? And can I do this on my own? And this story was very, I guess, relevant to me. And I think relevant for this year, that instead of getting caught up in what we don't have, by being joyous, we can actually create our reality. And we need to sort of dig deeper to find that joy with what we do, what we are given, and to think about the blessings that we do have, and to create that joyous atmosphere, and not to feel that negativity, and not to feel, because it's really, really, really about the attitude. And something that in researching all the simanim, which we're going to go through in a few minutes, of what we eat on Rosh Hashana, all the special foods that we eat on Rosh Hashana, it was very interesting because I learned something very new, and something I really, really wasn't aware of before. That the simanim means signs or symbols. And the simanim are very, they're very traditional. There's a lot of depth and a lot of meaning in all of the symbols. And there's a lot of significance to each one of them. And even though some of them just seem like cute and sweet, like, okay, we dip the apple in the honey, it seems very, very sweet, but there's a lot of significance to them. Yet, much more important than the significance of the simanim is the attitude that we have when we eat them. And it's the intention that we have when we eat them. And one of the things that was written, it said, what if someone's allergic to something? And it said, it doesn't matter if someone's allergic to the item, as long as they look at it and they think about it and they have the right intention for it, then that they're trying to achieve is achieved through merely saying the Yehi Ratzon, or, someone's allergic to honey, and then they just look at it and they just think about it. And I do know people who are allergic to honey. And if they do that, then that counts as if whatever intention they were trying to bring down, that counts as, and they're covered. And it's very interesting because, for example, like a mitzvah, like matzah, for example, that wouldn't be sufficient if a person did not eat the matzah, even if they had the most holiest intentions about that particular food and what matzah means. If they haven't actually taken a bite of matzah, they haven't fulfilled the mitzvah of matzah. Or and if they ate the matzah and they didn't think about what they were doing, they still fulfill the mitzvah of matzah. Whereas with the simanim on Rosh Hashana, the emphasis is much more on the intention, what you're thinking about. Ideally, you should then eat it, because eating is ingesting the blessings. And when we eat it, we make it a part of us. It becomes a part of our very body, a part of our blood. And so those blessings stay with us and they become one with us. So that's the ideal way to do it. But at the same time, it's much more the intention. And so for me, after sort of reading this and really thinking about it, I think that especially this year where things are so different, that really trying to be conscious of the intention of having a joyful atmosphere at the table, of really, whether you're alone and just reading things and trying to meditate on it more than usual, or if you're with other people, then you can share it together, but not to think so much about what we don't have, but to try and focus on the real meaning of the night and bring down the sweetest year ever. Like he said, he had the sweetest year ever. And so too, we should also have the sweetest year ever by bringing down the blessings that come through this, which comes from withholding our anger, withholding our sadness, and trying to be as joyful as possible. So for me, this was a very important exercise to sort of go through in the last few days to really learn that. the first thing we do at the table is we make Kiddush. Similar to Friday night, we make Kiddush. The Kiddush is different to Friday night, and it's in the machzor. If anyone, you can download from Chabad.org an abbreviated machzor, and it would have the Kiddush there. Or if you wanted to borrow a machzor, the Rosh Hashana prayer book from the shul, we will have a form available and you can come and borrow one. And I would highly recommend having your own machzor for Rosh Hashana, or it would be great if you can buy one to go through everything so that you can see all the instructions throughout all of Rosh Hashana. So the first step is to make Kiddush, and the Kiddush is, again, slightly different. It's a Yom Tov Kiddush, and it's different. And at the end of Kiddush, we say Shehachiyanu. If you already lit the candles and said Shehachiyanu, so you should light the candles at the time. That's already even before the meal. We light the candles. We say Yom again, the blessing is a little bit different to Shabbos. We say a special blessing for Yom HaZikaron, for Rosh Hashana. And that you do before sunset. And then when it comes time for the meal, a bit later, after you have already prayed and sit down for the meal. So the first step is the Kiddush. For those that already said Shehachiyanu when lighting candles, you don't repeat saying Shehachiyanu. For anyone who didn't light the candles, if the women lit the candles and they're men and they're saying Kiddush, then they would say Shehachiyanu at that point. After that, we go to wash our hands, and then we dip the challah into honey. We use round challah on Rosh Hashana, and we dip it into honey as opposed to salt. So why do we have round challahs as opposed to the braided challah, which we have the rest of the year? The round challahs we actually have until the end of Tishrei. So for the entire month, the whole high holiday season, we have the round challahs. And then we go back to the braided challahs after that. So why do we have round challahs? So one of the ideas of the round is that it shows the cycle, that every year there's a new cycle, there's a new energy that comes into the world, and it shows this idea of a cyclical pattern. So we have a round challah. Another idea of the round challah is perhaps what one of the main themes of Rosh Hashana is, and that is that it is like a crown, that the round challah represents a crown, because what we're doing on Rosh Hashana is we're crowning Hashem as king, that Hashem has many different aspects to him, and one idea of Hashem is his malchus, which if you look at the Kabbalistic sort of thing, the last one is Malchus. This is the one that relates to us in this world. This is when he created man, and we are accepting him as our king. This is a very, very big theme of Rosh Hashana. So it's the head of the year, and it's the day that we coronate Hashem as king. When we blow the shofar, we're also coronating Hashem as king. And when we eat the round challah, we're also saying that Hashem, this is your malchus, this is your kingship, and we are connecting to Hashem on that level. So this is the level that Hashem relates to the world, and we're asking Hashem to relate to the world in a new way and to give us a very, very beautiful, that the world should have a lot of blessings this year. So we dip the challah in honey, and again, the challah represents this idea of a king, and that we're crowning Hashem as the king. After that, there are many different things that we do, and there are many different customs that different communities keep of what they eat on this day. And again, it's not just being cute, like we're going to dip the apple in the honey because apple is sweet and honey is sweet. There's a very deep significance to each one of these. But because the intention is the main thing, there's also a lot of things that sometimes people introduce more modern, I don't know, sort of a bit more of a joke. Like I see there are a few people here who speak French. So there is a custom on Rosh Hashana. I think it's not really a custom. It's just sort of a more modern day thing where people will eat bananas on Rosh Hashanah for bonne année, for a good year in French, or some people will eat raisins on celery, because they say it's going to be a raise in salary. So there are a lot of more sort of modern day fun things that have developed, but the old traditional customs do have a tremendous amount of significance and depth. So we dip the apple in the honey. And this is probably the most known custom throughout the world, that on Rosh Hashanah, you dip the apple in the honey. Now, it's very important that the apple is actually a sweet apple. We try and only eat sweet foods on Rosh Hashanah. So if the apple, it needs to be sweet. There's a custom not to eat any sour foods for the entire Rosh Hashanah. So growing up, my mother took this to an absolute extreme. So nothing had any vinegar in it, or any lemon juice, or anything sour. We were no pickles. That was a bit of a disappointment, but nothing that was sour were we allowed to eat on Rosh Hashanah. It says that you shouldn't even have a taste of something sour. Everything should just be sweet. And so therefore the apple should be sweet. It doesn't matter what variety, as long as it's a sweet apple. And we take the apple and we dip it in the honey. And we say a special Yehi Ratzon, which means like it should be Hashem's will. And so we take the apple and the honey, and first we actually make the blessing on the apple, which is Bar Priya 8. It's all there in the Machzor. And then we say Yehi Ratzon Ofanecha Hashem Elokeinu V'Elokei Avosenu Shetechadesh Aleinu, that he should renew for us Shana Taiva Umasuka, a good and sweet year. And it specifically says a good and sweet year, because we're asking Hashem, and a big theme in the Rosh Hashanah is that we want a sweet year, not just a good year, but a sweet year. And the distinction between that is that sometimes something is good. And we know that everything that comes from Hashem is good. Even the things that appear to us in our life as being negative, they're all there to help us with our growth. All the challenges are only there to make us deeper, greater, better people. And that's wonderful. But that's not what we're asking Hashem for. We're asking Hashem for a sweet year, that the taste of the goodness, we should be able to taste it. It should be palpable. It shouldn't be a goodness that is only good, like in retrospect, or, the outcome is going to be good, but the actual taste, that when we are experiencing whatever we're going through in life, should feel good in a revealed sense. And therefore we try and keep everything very sweet on Rosh Hashanah, and not to have anything sour, because we're saying we want the taste of the experience. Whatever you're giving us this year, we don't want the challenges that are going to bring good. We want the good to be pure good and obviously good. So we take the apple and we dip it in the honey. Now, just to talk a little bit about what significance the apple in the honey is. So the apple, it talks about in Kabbalah that there is a level of God, which is called Chakal Tapuchin Kadisha. It's spoken about in the various Kabbalistic teachings. And this is in English translates as the field of holy apples, or the orchard of holy apples. And this is considered to be a part of Gan Eden, which is very, very, very sweet. It says it smells sweet, it tastes sweet, and the whole experience is very sweet. Just like an apple, it looks pretty on the outside, it tastes sweet, and it smells sweet. So the Chakal Tapuchin is considered the level of Malchus. Again, we spoke about that, that's kingship, which is what we're trying to, which is the energy of the day, is Hashem's kingship, that he's our ruler, he's our king. And so therefore, we take the apple, which represents this idea of the Chakal Tapuchin, of this level of Hashem, which is Malchus, which is kingship. The apple represents the kingship. And what do we do with this apple? We dip it into honey. What's honey? So honey comes from a bee. And a bee is something that could sting. And a bee is actually non-kosher to eat. Now, generally, when something is not kosher to consume, its products are also not kosher. So for example, a non-kosher animal, its milk would not be kosher. However, with the bee and the honey is kosher, even though the bee itself is not kosher. So we take something that is coming from a non-kosher place. It's through hard work and through the pollen and the flower, the bee makes this beautiful sweet honey. And this represents man's work in this world. Again, we said man was created on Rosh Hashana. And what is the purpose of man in creation? Man was the last thing to be created. First, the whole, every day was something else that was created. And on the last day, Hashem created man in a finished world. And Hashem said, I want you to take this world and I want you to transform it to be a place for me, so that the world is very neutral. And we need to create a holiness from the world. So we need to take our talents and we need to take whatever means we're given and the people that we interact with. And we need to create that this world should be a holy place. This is our task that we were given. And this is the purpose of man. And so on Rosh Hashanah, we're focusing on that because it's the birthday of man. It's the day that Adam was created, Adam and Eve were created, and they were created with a purpose to make this world a better place and to transform it. And the honey represents that because it is taken from a bee and it's then transformed into something through the process of pollination and everything. It creates something sweet and the end product is very sweet. And so we want to sort of like immerse in that. We want to take the apple and we want to say to Hashem, please rededicate yourself to this world. We want you to be our king and we're doing our part. We are doing our service to you. We're taking this world and we're trying to remove the negativity and create something positive from that. We want to take the bee and we want to turn it into honey. That's what our service is. That's what we're doing. And with this action, we're inspiring Hashem to once again come down into this world, to immerse himself in this world. So Hashem sort of is a little bit more removed on Rosh Hashanah, and we're trying to draw him down into the world, and we're trying to create the energy for that year. And so, but the honey represents our service to God, and we're asking Hashem that he should come down. This malchus, this apple should come and immerse itself in the honey, and we should have a sweet year. And so that's a little bit about what dipping the apple in the honey is. I'm going to pause for 1 second and just see if there are any practical questions here. If you want to unmute yourself, any questions, or if anyone wants to raise their hand. Okay, don't see anything. Okay, you can either raise your hand virtually or, okay, so then I'll just keep talking. Okay, so after we dip the apple in the honey, and we say the special line that we say, asking Hashem that it should be his will, that we should have a good year. And whenever we say it should be your will, we actually are asking Hashem that we are creating the will as well. Again, it's all dependent on our actions and our attitudes and our behavior. And so we are creating Hashem's will. We're like inspiring him. We're bringing down his energy for that. Okay, so Then after that, there's a custom to eat a pomegranate. The pomegranate represents that there's a lot of seeds in the pomegranate, and some have the custom to say a special prayer again for the pomegranate. The Chabad custom, and what we do is we only say the prayer, the special line, the Yehi Ratzon for the first one, for the apples and honey, but many communities will say for many more foods, they'll say Yehi Ratzon, and the Yehi Ratzon that you say is Yehi Ratzon Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosenu Shenirba Zechoyas Kiriman, that you should may it be your will, Hashem, our God of the God of our forefathers, that our merits increase as the seeds of a pomegranate. That we're asking Hashem to look at us meritoriously, that we have so many merits, that we're coming to you with as many as there are seeds of the pomegranate. That's how many merits we should have. That's how many mitzvahs we should have. And it says that even a simple Jew, every single person does so many mitzvahs all the time, without even necessarily, we're just constantly trying to do good things. And so you should recognize all these mitzvahs that we've done, and you should count that in a meritorious way, and we should merit a good year as a result of that. So if you also look at the pomegranate, on the top of the pomegranate, what does it look like? What happens if we can't get a pomegranate? It's a very, very good question. If you cannot get a pomegranate, again, if you have the intention that you want to eat a pomegranate, then that itself already counts in this particular, for Rosh Hashana, that itself counts. So if you can't get a pomegranate and you just have pomegranate juice or something like that, then you can still have the intention of the pomegranate, and it will still, you're still tapping into that energy. Like we spoke about earlier, unlike matzah, which you have to actually do the mitzvah, with the simanim, it's much more about what you are thinking and what you are saying and what you're trying to bring down and your attitude in the whole meal rather than just the actual foods. So obviously it's ideal to get pomegranates. It's not always available here. Recently it has been, but I guess at the moment, I don't know if they are available, but if you can't get it, then you can't get it. It's fine. There's a story actually of a man who came to his rabbi, because we haven't gotten to it yet, but we're going to talk soon about the head of the fish. And he said that he's very, very poor and he doesn't have enough money to buy a head of a fish, couldn't afford it. So his rabbi said to him, so get the tail of a fish. And the whole thing of the fish is that we're supposed to eat the head and not the tail. And he said that what you should think of when you're eating the tail is that Hashem should make an end to all the pain and suffering that you're going through. Obviously, this person was quite poverty stricken and he must have had some other difficulties and challenges in his life. And he said, it's fine. Just as long as you have that intention in mind, it actually isn't as significant what you eat, but how you eat it. So sorry, what was that? Having a pomegranate twig. What happens? Anything would count. If that helps you have the intention and you want to have a pomegranate twig on your table, that certainly would be a good thing to have. And it's more about the intention than the actual food in a situation where you can't get it. Again, looking at the pomegranate, you see that it has like a crown on top, and that also represents the crowning of Hashem as king, because that is so much the theme of Rosh Hashana. So even just the physical pomegranate should have a little, if it has it's sort of symbolized by that little crown that there is on the pomegranate. The pomegranate also should be sweet. The Ben Ish Chai says that if your pomegranate is not sweet, and often a pomegranate that we have today has a bit of a tart flavor, or it's a little bit got that tang to it. So he says, the Ben Ish Chai says that you should then put sugar on your pomegranate and make sure it's sweet. And he says this several times because he puts a lot of emphasis that the foods that we eat should be sweet to taste. It shouldn't just be sweet in a hidden way. It should be sweet in a revealed way. So he says, if you can't get a sweet pomegranate, and I think he lived in Baghdad, so I think pomegranates were very abundant and very, very, very sweet. But he said, if you can't, then you should put sugar on the pomegranate to make it sweet. Again, all the foods should be sweet. We're emphasizing here the sweetness because we want it to be sweet for us. The next thing that we eat is the head of a fish. And we say, again, another Yehirat sign. Some people have a custom to have the head of a fish, and some people have the custom to have the head of a ram. Personally, I've never seen anyone with the head of a ram. I don't know. I think it's very interesting. Maybe I'll try and get one this year. I've always said that, but I thought it would freak everyone out. But maybe this year I'm going to try and find a head of a ram and see if they even sell that in Sydney. And so, and the head of the ram, it represents, again, the shofar comes from the ram, and it represents Yitzchak and the binding of Yitzchak, which happened on Rosh Hashana. We want Hashem to remember that schos. And so that's the head of a ram. And the head of a fish, and we say, again, Yehirat sign, that we should be like a head and not like a tail. So we specifically emphasize, again, this idea of Rosh, of a head. What does that mean to be like a head and not like a tail? So we know that man, again, talking about man and his creation, man is created with his head above his heart, and man is created upright. And we want that our brain and our heads should be what motivates our actions and our responses to things. That sometimes it's very easy for our passions or our anger, or that's sort of where we react from. We react from a place that's just very emotional and sometimes not thought out and not, if we just had a few more minutes to calm down and to think, we would behave very differently. And so we're saying that we want to be like a head. We want to be a master over ourselves. And this is one of the key things of a human being, is that we can achieve this level, that we can be a master over ourselves, and that we should be in control of our behavior, and we shouldn't just be reactive, and we shouldn't just be responding to whatever's going on around us, but that we should be the ones in control, and that we should be the ones who are really making decisions, and it shouldn't be something that we're just responding to. And so therefore, we ask specifically that we should be like a head and not like a tail. We should be living on the level of head and not on a level that we're just following our emotions or following society around us as well, that we shouldn't just be conforming to what's happening, but we should be ahead. We should think and we should respond in that way. So that's a little bit about the head and why we emphasize the head, again, because it's Rosh Hashana. There is a custom as well to eat carrots on Rosh Hashana. Again, you don't have to do all of this. Like at home, we just do the first one with the Yehirat sign, then we have the pomegranate, then we have the fish head, and then we go to the meal. So there are lots of different customs that have developed in many, many different countries. And because this is something that is just like a tradition and a customary thing, it's happened in many different places that they have developed different customs. There's a custom amongst a lot of Ashkenazi Jews to eat carrots, because the Yiddish word for carrots is merin, which means to multiply. And we're asking Hashem for all the good things to multiply in our life, that we should multiply and be fruitful. So that is another custom. Some people actually will say that we should that our merits should increase like carrots. They'll actually say the line, and some people will just eat it. And there's a traditional dish that we eat on Rosh Hashana called simis, which is carrots usually have a bit of sugar or honey that it's stewed in, and it sort of cooks for a long time. And it's a very, very sweet dish. And that's very traditional to eat on Rosh Hashanah as well. So anything that includes carrots is a tradition as well. I'm going to go through a few other traditions, which a lot of Sephardim keep. When I taught in a Sephardi school in New York many years ago. It was actually a Persian school. And when it came to Rosh Hashanah, the teacher, the head of the school actually said, you're a very good teacher, but we're actually going to ask you to step aside and I'm going to do this class. And it was really fascinating because I learned so many new traditions that I was not exposed to growing up. And this particular community, I think they did about 15 or 18 different simanim that they had. That was their custom. And the teacher came in and she did almost like you would do like a model Pesach Seder, where you go through each one of the steps. She went through every single step with the students and taught them what they say and what it symbolizes. So there are a lot of customs out there, and you should definitely explore what your family does and what their heritage is and what they've kept. There's a custom to eat, for example, a leek, and to say the blessing, that because the word for leek is similar to the word for destroying, and so you're saying that the enemies should be destroyed, and that all your enemies should be destroyed and all their evil plans should be destroyed. So because the word is similar, so that became a siman, that became a symbol, that became a sign, and that is something that has been incorporated in the traditions. The Holy Shalah asked, well, if it just is the connection is just that they shouldn't be destroyed. That your enemies should be destroyed. Maybe this is going to go on you. If it's the connection is the word, then maybe it's the word connection, the destruction. Maybe it's going to go on you. And he said, no, it's all about the intention. Again, everything I was learning in this lead up was all about the intention, and therefore, like, I feel like this was the message that was almost like jumping out at me the whole time I was reading up on all of these simanim. The simanim are good, but the intention is way more important. And to really try to emphasize this year that even though we're not having the Rosh Hashana that we're used to and the Rosh Hashana that we would ideally love to have, but the intention and the attitude and the atmosphere that we create is way more important for the full year than what we actually do. So if there's something you're not sure about 100% and it's the night and there's no one to talk to, the most important thing is not to get frustrated, but to actually just feel the joy that we're having Rosh Hashanah and to feel happy that that Hashem is choosing to be our king and we want to be his people. And as long as we have the right intention and we're asking Hashem for a sweet year, we should have a sweet year. Another common food that people eat are beets. And the reason for that is because they say that the word for beets, tilkud, that is similar to the word for being removed, and that our adversaries should be removed. And so there's a special Yehi sign for each one of these. I've actually got a paper here, which has many different ones that I'm actually reading off. And I will post this on the Nefesh WhatsApp group. And if anyone else is interested and not on the group, I'm happy to also send it to you. It's got for dates and beans and pomegranates and the fish and all of those. So anyone who's interested in that, I can post that on the group as well, so you can go through that. But the most important thing, again, to remember over Rosh Hashanah is that everything we do should be in the way of a sweetness and a goodness. And there's just another story that I was reading, and there was a young man, and he was complaining to his rabbi. And he said that he was having a lot of trouble in his marriage. And he said that things had deteriorated so badly to the point where his wife on Rosh Hashana, she served him, instead of the head, she served him a tail, like out of spite. And he said, this is how bad things have gotten between us. And so the Rebbe answered him and he said, so did you eat it? He said, it's not. And he said, it's not about what you eat, it's how you eat it. And did you get angry? And I thought that was very deep and also very profound in terms of like his marriage. Like I think what the Rebbe was saying to him, what his Rebbe was saying to him was that if you don't get angry, not only would you have a better year, you'll have a better marriage. But so much of it depends on our own attitude. And so, especially this year, just really trying to bring such good energy, sweet energy. We don't want an energy that we need to find the good in it when, in retrospect, we want to find the energy that's so sweet that we should all just be with Mashiach, and we should have so much goodness with no more negativity, and we should all be able to celebrate together in unity and really be joyful together in a true, deep way, such a revealed way with absolute no negativity. Are there any questions here? Can you have the inside of the fruits of the pomegranate on the table, or should be uncut to see the crown? You can have the seeds, that's completely fine. It just represents, the crown represents that, but you don't need to have it on the table. It's nice if you do, because it does remind us of the kingship, but it's not a necessity. Any other questions here? If anyone wants to unmute themselves, or if you would like to put it in the chat, I'm very happy to answer any questions about what we do on the night of Rosh Hashanah at the table. It's also interesting. Some people have the custom to dip apples into sugar. If that's your custom, that's definitely what you should be doing. So again, there are many, many different customs that have developed in different countries. And it's a very sort of specific thing. So everyone have a very good Rosh Hashanah. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Nechama Dina.
A pleasure. Good to see you, Beth.
Yeah, thank you. Did you cover any other things besides honey cake for dessert?
Oh no, I didn't mention the honey cake for dessert. Anything sweet is customary.
Yeah. So what else would you make besides honey cake? Because I'm a bit over honey cake.
Honey cake is definitely the most traditional. And some people will make like apple cake in honey or use pomegranate seeds. I tend to use a lot of honey and pomegranate juice and apples in the regular dishes, just to, just feels very much Rosh Hashanah-ish. But yeah. But really, those are the traditional foods that we say the blessings on, or the Yehi Ratzons on. But anything sweet is traditional. And growing up, we had a lot of sweet food over Rosh Hashanah, and nothing savory, nothing sour, nothing like that. Everything was extremely, extremely sweet.
And your challah bake recipe, which I absolutely love. I use that pretty much. I'll make challah and then freeze the rest. That is the most perfect challah recipe I've ever had, because it just makes such quantity. And with big families like yours and like mine, it's great. But for Rosh Hashana, can I substitute the sugar for honey? Or
I have a special recipe that I use for Rosh Hashana, which is a honey recipe. Mm-hmm. I also generally make a spelt challah with honey. And so I'll make that as well for Rosh Hashanah. So I'm happy to post my Rosh Hashanah challah recipes for everyone. If you would like, I can post that on the WhatsApp as well.
Yeah, because I wondered if it was just substituting sugar for honey, but maybe that doesn't work, and I don't want to.
I think this is quite a different recipe. I don't think it just substitutes it. And I do like to put honey instead of sugar just because but then again, sugar is sweet and a lot of people do dip their apple into sugar and eat sugar. There is a Sephardi custom to have sugar on the table the entire month of Tishrei, the entire season of the high holidays, to have a little bit of sugar on the table. We dip our challah in honey as well for the entire time. So for the entire season instead of in salt. So sugar is also good. But for me, honey feels a bit more traditional because that's what I personally grew up with. And I'm happy to post the honey recipe, the challah honey recipe.
That would be really good. That would be really good. I also too read that you shouldn't eat nuts.
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding that. There is a custom not to eat nuts on Pesach. We eat a lot of nuts on Pesach, on Rosh Hashana. Thank you for reminding me. I forgot to mention that. The reason for that is because it says that the numerical value of nuts is the same as egos. Egos is the same as chet, which means sin, without the aleph, which means that there's no redeeming factor in that sin, something that's just very low and it's purely evil. So we don't want to sort of associate with anything like that. There was the Kutzker Rebbe, who was very sharp. He said, chet is the gematria egos, but it's also the gematria of chet, of sin. So we should also not sin on Rosh Hashana.
Yeah. So legumes won't be a problem though, like kidney beans, chickpeas.
Beans are not a problem at all. Some people do have a custom to eat certain beans, and they say, definitely I remember, and it's very vague because this is over 20 years ago, but when I taught in the Sephardi Persian school, there were certain beans that they ate as a part of their tradition, and they would say, especially Yehi Ratzon on that it should be Hashem's will, that they should, and I don't remember the detail exactly, but there was also for beans. So beans, chickpeas, things like that are not a problem. You certainly can eat that on Rosh Hashana. Okay.
No, that's great. I look forward to seeing that challah recipe. And any dessert recipes, because no one's really overly keen on honey cake here. They might have a little bit. So I'd rather make something that's like everybody really enjoys. But you're saying anything sweet will do.
Anything sweet?
Apple pie.
The only thing you're not meant to eat are the nuts other than sour foods. Yeah.
Nechama, I often for Rosh Hashana on one of them, I make this like apple cinnamon cake, and then it's got like this sugar crust on the top. It's really.
Can you post the recipe?
Yeah, I can put it in. It's like my go-to cake, and sometimes like people always ask for it, and sometimes I'll make it for like a brunch or something as well.
Sounds great.
It's a really good Rosh cake. I was like, I'm not feeling honey cake this year. I'm gonna make the apple and cinnamon sugar cake.
Yeah. That's sort of how I feel too. Like no one, I'll make honey cake and I'm the only one that eats it, and then even after a day or so I've had enough of it, I freeze it. But it'd be nice to have a few different varieties.
I'll send the recipe.
That'll be great. And if anyone else has recipes, I could put a few recipes on. I make like sometimes a roast with the pomegranate sauce. And then I'm just trying to think what other foods I like to incorporate sometimes. Definitely apple cakes. Golda, that would be great if you can post that. I do have honey cake recipes that are quite moist that I can post as well. And I think if anyone else wants to post recipes, please feel free as well. It would be fun to try different foods that people eat on Rosh Hashana.
We should do that. We should do that one year, as a bit of a fundraising thing, because I know they did that at our school. They this was a few years back, but everybody got their favourite recipe, and it was made into a book, and then it had like all pictures, and it was like a dedication, and it ended up being like the school recipe book that you can then buy as a fundraiser, and it just like had someone's recipe and then who it was dedicated to, and it ended up being like a book you could have in your kitchen, like a recipe book with everybody's tried and tested recipes throughout the year.
Right. Someone wants to take on that project, I will be very happy to support it.
Maybe a lockdown project. No, that's great. Thank you, Nechama Dina. That's great. I'm really looking forward to the Rabbi's help to follow the prayer book, because after last year, I think I read every word of the entire book, so I didn't miss anything. And honestly, it gave me a new respect for the rabbi. So I want to do it properly this year and know what I'm doing, since I'm leading the services. And yeah, so I'm really looking forward to that. I hope we've got like almost like a page thing, like go from this page to that page, and I can literally tick it off. So I know.
Yeah, a bit of a guide that way. Yeah.
Yeah, which would be great. But thank you for your time, Nechama Dina. That was really interesting.
Oh, thank you. And thanks, everyone. And wishing everyone a very beautiful, sweet new year with good, revealed good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was